Going. So hi everyone, welcome to our panel. My name is Brenda Beckador. I'm the Executive Director for Alberta IoT. We're focused obviously on businesses in the Alberta market that are in IoT and emerging technology. I'm also part of AIoT Canada's board, with a focus on developing a pan-Canadian IoT ecosystem and providing a forum for Canada's Internet of Things conversation. Today's panel, we're going to be talking about analytics for smarter buildings from post-construction to preventative maintenance. This panel will be recorded and obviously sent out afterwards. We do have a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen where you can put in your questions, and at the end of our conversation, we will bring it forward to our wonderful panelists to talk about. So right now I'm going to get started, and we'll start off with Keith. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks a lot, Brenda. I'm Keith Larose. I work with Copper Tree Analytics, and my team and I focus on delivering IoT and building analytics solutions to customers, focusing mostly on energy management and reducing waste with regards to operational maintenance times and things like that. So I'm based out of Vancouver. I'm really happy to be part of the panel today.
Thank you. Hamid.
Thank you, Brenda. My name is Hamid Mohammed. I'm the CEO of AOMS Technologies. Our company is focused on industrial IoT solutions. As a part of our solutions, we provide IoT solutions to construction sites with the goal of making construction sites smarter with sensors and digital solutions.
Oh, very cool. John, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, this is John. I'm manager of digital construction for the Business Technology Group, corporate group out of our PCL headquarters in Edmonton. I work alongside Brian and others in our company to basically operationalize technologies like IoT sensors and others in the space to accelerate the use on our construction sites. And so that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, and so Brian, what do you do with PCL?
Oh, thanks. I'm a senior manager in our business technology group. Like John, I report to our CIO, and one of my other responsibilities is I'm the product manager for Job Site Insights, our IoT ecosystem / construction platform. And happy to be here today.
This is a very exciting panel. Elliot, last but not least, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Elliot here. I'm Senior Director of Prop Tech and Sales over at IoT Solutions, and I focus on primarily interfacing with a variety of stakeholders across the real estate industry and construction industry, primarily to mitigate water damage risk at all states of the asset life cycle, and work with partners in order to generate more power across construction sites and developments.
Excellent. So I'm going to get started right away. We have quite a few questions, and I think a very exciting dialogue that we're going to have. So my very first question is, how with COVID is this impacting construction, and how does IoT technology assist in it? And I'm going to start with you, John, and then we'll circle around.
Yeah, thanks for the questions, and thanks for having me again. I think I would categorize the impact of COVID from kind of two bases, kind of its negative impacts and then the positive side. And negative, as a lot of us seen already in the construction market, due to a lot of the shutdowns and lockdowns that are across the provinces, and especially in Ontario here, we've been forced to shut down our sites, delays of projects that were supposed to start, potential developments for clients that have now been delayed or put on hold. So there's been that negative impact on just the industry, but we've been kept essential. So it's been still positive from that perspective, but there's still a little bit of that negative impact from our sites not operating as usual or as productive. But I would say from a positive impact, and that's kind of where the IoT side of the question, answering the IoT portion of the question there is, we've been able to see, in my opinion, COVID really helped in accelerating the adoption of technology, and specifically in IoT space. And we've seen that with really the simple fact that when a site shuts down, they want to be able to monitor their sites remotely at any given time in real time. And so the IoT devices have been able to give us that idea that I can monitor my site as a superintendent, as a project manager at any time, 24/7. And so the adoption of IoT devices and the use of GSI, for example, in PCL has actually grown and has given us the ability to go out there and deploy even more sensors and capabilities, to the point that our projects, when they're putting kind of the risk mitigation plans together for during the shutdown and, you know, between March, April, and so on, they put together the plan and part of their plan, they put how the IoT devices are going to be able to monitor the site and mitigate those risks while they're away or while there's anybody on site and so on. So I think that's where we're seeing acceleration, and it's been, you know, from that perspective, it's been very positive.
Excellent. Very interesting. Hamid, what is your thoughts on this question?
Thank you, Brenda, for the question. I mean, as John mentioned, I want to expand that with the help of IoT, we can automate routine inspection tasks. I mean, basically to reduce the number of unnecessary visits to job sites. And that way we can focus the job sites only on essential workers, the people whose presence in the job site is absolutely necessary. Even post April and May, where the time that the construction job sites were opened, there's still a concern of spread of the virus and outbreak in the construction sites. I think what IoT can do is to mitigate that risk by helping everyone, all the project stakeholders, to implement an automation platform to remotely inspect and visualize the job sites. And this is only possible by putting the right technology and an IoT platform in order to collect the data at the right time and also analyze the data. We also have seen some other interesting approaches that some companies have had. Companies have actually implemented very, very interesting contact tracing solutions for job sites, using wearables, using other types of tracking tools to ensure that they have all the tools in place to mitigate any potential outbreak of the pandemic and the virus in those environments.
Yeah, we definitely have seen a lot of acceleration in the IoT space, and definitely around risk is definitely a big part of it. Keith, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just, echo everything everyone else has said, but, nothing makes disruption happen faster than, necessity, I suppose. So, we've been at this for years in our case, pushing transformation to digital-based, maintenance and reducing the amount of labor time spent on a facility doing, routine maintenance and those kind of things. And I think if anything, this has just made it more evident that that's the future. And much like in many parts of our lives, and here we all are on Zoom, for instance, instead of sitting in a conference center somewhere. So I think in many aspects of different industries, that's happening, and it's in a way good to see. It unfortunately happened because of this pandemic, but I think in a way, as we come out of this, I think we'll never be going back to the way things were. I think this is really a disruptive moment for us all. So
100%
exciting,
agree.
exciting in that way, but not great in the way it had to come around, right? So
yeah, exactly. Elliot, what about from Eddie Solutions' point of view? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would pretty much be echoing the majority of what has been said. I think already on this subject. Ultimately, it's really about enabling remote analytics on site at this stage, the ability to reduce contact where required, as well as make the job site more efficient, given the fact that you'll have less occupancy on site, you'll have less eyes and ears there to deal with those issues. We need to rely on technology as it relates to, variety of operating environments, not just in construction, but across the board. And so this whole period has basically just been a massive accelerator for all forms of technology, because everyone's eyes and ears are actually open and people are looking actively for solutions as opposed to reacting to a scenario now.
Very good points. Brian, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think, again, echoing what everybody else has said, I think one of the perspectives in the longer term is that the industry has had a challenge with a shortage of skilled labor. And I think any technologies that bring more productivity to labor, and in recognition that there is not as much skilled labor. I know PCL is challenged with that in some of our jurisdictions, and I think any digital technologies, IoT inclusive, that mitigate or improve labor productivity are certainly welcome on a job site.
Very good point. So our next question, to kind of keep on going with the flow here, after long periods of lower or completely non-existent occupancy rate in buildings and facilities, how can we ensure that our buildings are being brought on back online in the safest and most effective way possible? And Elliot, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are your thoughts? And
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, there's going to be some significant challenges as it relates to bringing your buildings back online. Also, depending on what type of asset it is, what the occupancy was and how many people you had actually maintaining the building while you were in low occupancy periods. But as systems are beginning to kick back on, it's really important to be diligent and test and ensure that valves are operational across the building, that your critical systems are moving, and that essentially when you're going to be reinitializing a lot of these systems, that's where you actually bear some substantial risk as operators. So the other thing to really look out for is, while COVID-19 has basically created the situation where you are at lower occupancy in a lot of environments, it's also created a great opportunity to implement solutions in place while you are at lower occupancy. So you're not going to disrupt business as much because the disruption is already there. And you also need to deal with a pressing use case, which is that you have various building systems that could be substantial risks as you start to get more into substantial occupancy.
interesting, very interesting. Keith, do you have any follow-up to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we focus a lot with customers on making sure that they're running buildings efficiently. And so in low periods of occupancy, a lot of our customers have, and for financial constraints too, they have dialed back sort of a lot of their operational schedules. They've changed the way the buildings are operating in a lot of different ways. And one of the things we always try to enforce with customers is, if while you're doing that, make sure you record and keep track of everything you've done in those low occupancy periods. Because it's easy to lose track of those things, and then all of a sudden, it could be, okay, let's bring everyone back to the buildings, and what was changed during those low occupancy periods? Do you have a record of all that? Are you able to make sure that some of those things, for instance, if you lower hot water supply temperatures below a certain threshold, you're at risk of Legionella, for instance, in hot water supply systems and other systems, and those are pretty serious issues that could come up. So you want to make sure that that you are tracking everything that you're doing, and making sure you are making as many economies as you can during low occupancy periods, but that you are ready to go and you're ready to turn the building back to its safest and most efficient operation given the occupancy levels when they come back. So that's definitely something to consider. And use of IoT and analytics really helps to identify some of those issues. Humans are humans, and it's easy to lose track of things, and very difficult for you to go through and essentially recommission a building almost for after a long period of time being in low occupancy mode. So coming back and using technology to do that in a more efficient way and a more thorough and safe way is really important. And so there is technology that can help with that.
Well, and I know, coming from Alberta, we've seen our buildings be empty, and then we started to really actually start being back into our buildings, and now we're stepping back away again. So we're going through this more than one cycle, which is also a challenge for everybody, trying to make sure our buildings are safe. Moving into the next question around this, so how does IoT in this construction world work? And Brian, I'm going to get you to start with what's going on with PCL.
I think I may have lost our host.
Yep, I'm still here. Everyone else is still here, I think. Yeah.
Yep, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in then. I know the question was asked, how does IoT in the construction world work? And, how did PCL evolve for a very traditional industry into the IoT world? I think it begins with, some years ago, our new CIO came on board, and we really started talking about digitization in the construction industry, particularly here at PCL. And I recall an article, McKinsey published an article, I think it was titled Imagining Construction's Digital Future, where it ranked 22 industries in its digitization capability, and construction ranked near the bottom, second from the bottom of the 22, just slightly ahead of hunting and fishing, as I recall. So clearly the industry digitally was lacking, and arguably still is lacking, but is making great strides. And our evolution towards IoT was really founded on 4 principles or 4 pillars. Number one, data integration, the ability to integrate data IoT generates a lot of data, so the organization must be ready to integrate that data and use that data. And then you want to do something with that data. Advanced analytics are front and center of our initiatives around IoT, in that we want to be able to not only ingest the IoT data and do something with it, but combine it with other data sources for insights. And then lastly, our digital transformation, if you will, and our digital operating model was predicated on the ability to be mobile. People in the workforce in the construction phase of construction use mobile devices, and we supplement that lastly with cloud. So those four pillars really set the stage for arguably success in JSI, and I think it was fundamental to that. JSI and how it works for PCL was really predicated on three principles: make PCL a better builder, a quality builder, and extend that to the industry; improve operational excellence on the job site, execution, lean construction. And I think thirdly, our business development folks years ago were commenting that the industry was looking at smart buildings. And I think that smart construction had been missed. And in the chain of a building being constructed smartly leads to a smart building, which leads to the ultimate of smart cities. So I think IoT for PCL in the industry really addresses that hole, if you will, that we did not yet have smart construction. And very simply, in a nutshell, IoT on the job site emits telemetry data from a variety of LoRa-enabled sensors, and they do so wirelessly. We can measure temperature, humidity, air pressure, many environmental variables, sensors attached to machine, material, and equipment for asset tracking and location. And then drones and 3D imagery are becoming more prevalent on job sites through other technologies, and those are all enabled by IoT. But more importantly, we get that data, what do we do with it? You know, we want to be able to alert and notify our job site personnel to adverse conditions. And that's really the heart of IoT on a job site, is the ability to inform you with data about what's going on. And then when those conditions are not optimal and can lead to rework, they can lead to lost productivity, they can lead to schedule issues, you want to get on top of that. And that's really what the notification capability is in our platform provides with IoT. And then I think the last 2 points I want to make on this are, as I said earlier, IoT data is really time series data, time-stamped data. In and of itself, seemingly not valuable. It certainly allows you to alert job site personnel to conditions on the job site that are problematic. But I think the real power of JSI and IoT is that when you combine that data with other enterprise data sources, other third-party data sources, now you're in the world of predictive or prescriptive analytics, the ability to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning. So you're not just reacting to the conditions on the job site. I think this telemetry allows you to predict what's going to happen on a job site, foresee what's going to happen on the job site. And the more data you get, we move from being an advisor that something's going wrong to being an advisor that says, hey, this might go wrong and you should correct it. So that's really the heart and soul of our IoT platform, Job Site Insights. And I think the fourth point I want to make is that there's a lot of technology out there in the IoT space, and our platform, and I think constructive platforms, are ones that are able to integrate with all this IoT technology. And that's exactly what we've done with JSI. Is we've built it on open APIs. It's an open ecosystem that allows us to use our own technology and our own software, but more importantly, integrate other applications that bring further IoT capability to the job site. So that's my quick synopsis in 2 minutes or less. But that's our story. We grew from, you know, a digital foundation of analytics and data, and we set ourselves up. And I think that's key to success in any IoT initiative, is to have the foundation.
If you don't mind, Brenna, I think it's important also to realize from the synopsis. I think this is a great synopsis that Brian put together, and I think to add a little context, the IoT devices today on our job sites have made digital transformation real. It's an actual thing. It's happening. It's not just that we're talking about it anymore, or it's not when you say data analytics, they understand it, they're getting it. And so I think that is a huge real shift that's happening. And it would have not been possible if we didn't go down that road. And I think that's a powerful statement today on a lot of our job sites.
Well, and I was going to say, I know because I deal with PCL You guys are a major sponsor of Alberta IoT, and we actually have members that are on your Job Insight platform. And it's been really interesting to watch the journey of an SME business actually come in and work with you guys. And you guys are amazing to support someone that is in the SME space. So very cool. Keith, do you have anything insight to add to this before we move on?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely Brian hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's not that, you know, one company or one sensor manufacturer or one platform developer can accomplish everything that we need to do. It's a huge ecosystem, and you know, we're consumers of data here at Coppertree, so we look to vendors and innovators who are developing new IoT sensors, new technologies that we can then bring in and analyze, running analysis on. I think one way that JSI has been quite smart, as Brian is alluding, is that you're not trying to create sensors yourself to go and do this or that. You're teaming with the industry leaders and other software vendors to help deliver a more holistic approach, and that's really important. Whereas, you know, you can't just strike out on your own and try to do everything yourself. I think that's really important. So this ecosystem that's been developing is really exciting, and we're really happy to be part of it. And you know, and I think that's what's really exciting about this industry, is that it's really evolving quickly now, much more quickly than, you know, 8 years ago when I started in my position. You know, it was really siloed, and everyone had their own, you know, this is my toy, I'm keeping it over here. And now everyone has open APIs, and if you don't, you're not going to go very far in this industry anymore. So.
Well, it's nice to see the collaboration in the construction industry, that's for sure. So moving on, we have quite a few questions to cover, and I can see that the Q&A is starting to fill up too. The real estate construction industry has in the past, and probably still is, an area that's been slow to integrate new technology. Are you seeing any changes there? And Brian, I'm going to let you start with that one.
I get to ramble on again. I think, you know, if you look at the evidence, I mean, certainly McKinsey says construction's a digital laggard, and we're slightly ahead of fishing and hunting, which is a bit disappointing, but nonetheless, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I recently read an article in Business Week that said that venture capital in 2019 was contributing to construction technology at 15 times the pace of other industries. So people are waking up to this fact. And another statistic that I found surprising was that in the past 5 years, investors poured $25 billion into engineering and construction technology, which was up from $8 million from the previous 5 years. So investment, I think the industry is waking up to the fact that there is a market here, obviously, and more importantly, there's a need. And I think that need is driven by construction's flat productivity, its lower margins, its schedule issues, and any technology such as IoT and analytics that are advancing that are certainly going to be received well by the industry. And I think others on this call would agree with that. But yeah, I think we've been a laggard. Construction has been a laggard, and the evidence speaks for itself. You look at the VC guys, the people investing in these companies, there is clearly a market here for it, driven by a need to improve productivity, mitigate risk on job sites, and improve schedule. And you do those things in construction, and you're doing a lot to contributing to the shareholders' bottom line.
Excellent answer. Hamid, do you want to add to this?
Sure. Yeah, I think as Brian mentioned, the industry was slow in adopting innovation, specifically new technologies. I think in the past, probably the decision factor for adopting technology was just the cost, or considering technology as just a cost item. I think what we see now is that the industry is looking at it as a way to make increasing quality, reducing waste, and making job sites safer. So I think that's basically a driver for adoption. We also should accept that. I mean, based on my experience in the IoT and sensor industry, a few years ago, IoT technologies, despite their successful adoption in many other industries, they were not at the maturity level that is acceptable to the construction industry. I mean, construction is a very special environment, and it requires very reliable systems, including the hardware, software, analytics, connectivity, that they have to work together in order to stream the data and get insight from the data. On the other side, also, if you look at the cost of adoption, now, I mean, there are two costs basically when we adopt technology. One is the capital cost or the implementation cost, and the other one is the ongoing cost. with the significant reduction in the cost of connectivity. Basically, you can have in any sensor, you can have a data SIM card, and at a very, very low cost, you can connect it to the cloud these days. And also the ongoing cost of data hosting, data management, and analytics at the cloud level. These are all contributing to the reducing the cost of basically ongoing cost of implementing technologies in the industry, especially in the construction industry. I mean, if you look at the technology adoption life cycle, pretty much all industries, they follow that life cycle with different shapes. We now see a very good number of visionaries, early adopters in the construction industry, and their goal is not just increasing productivity or efficiency. They're looking at a much larger scope beyond that, and it includes safety, build quality, waste management, predictive equipment maintenance, and many, many other aspects that John, Brian, and the other panelists mentioned in this call. So I think it's going in a very good direction, and VCs are behind this growth. I mean, because we are in the technology side of the whole ecosystem, and we see that VCs are very, very supportive of new technologies for and IoT, especially in the construction industry.
Excellent points. John, Keith, or Elliot, do you have anything you would like to add to this?
Sure. I think that, there was in a previous panel earlier today, one of the other panelists, Adrian, alluded to this point, and I think it's very well stated, essentially that if you look at construction relative to most other industries, if you went back about 100 years, in almost every other industry, people would have no idea, or sorry, if you went forward by 100 years in any industry, people would have no idea what they're looking at. Like a pilot wouldn't be able to fly, a commercial pilot wouldn't be able to fly a plane today. However, if you took a plumber from, let's say, 100 years ago and brought him to a construction site, he'd likely understand a lot of the distribution system. And so that's part of it, is mentality as it relates to a lot of, the various trades and sort of the mentality within construction. However, to Hamid's point, to John's point, and Brian's point, ultimately, within the construction industry, there are certain trailblazers who are looking at this, not just from the perspective of, building efficiencies, but bridging that gap into like a new era of construction, new era of understanding, because a lot of those use cases that operators are going to be pretty much cross-functional from also a construction site perspective. And so it's important to be able to implement technology and put things in place that are going to have an effect both on your productivity and also ultimately on the quality of the end user's product and the operator's product.
Some very good points there, especially around the trades and the fact moving forward, where construction is going. Keith or John, do you have anything else to add to this?
I'll give it to Keith this time.
Yeah, I think where there's a gap between other industries and this one, it's accelerating. It's kind of like hot water freezes faster than room temperature water. You know what I mean? So this is accelerating, and there's a certain gap to fill there, and I think the industry's stepping up, and that's been really exciting to watch too. Again, the types of sensors available, the types of technologies available. It's just really, I think, accelerating probably faster than other industries, as Brian pointed out from that article you read. So yeah, I just agree with everything. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So let's talk about analytics. How can the construction industry utilize the data effectively during and post construction? Let's start with Hamid.
Sure. Just before answering this question and comment on that, we should look at IoT as a multi-pillar infrastructure. So IoT I believe sits on three major pillars, and it includes the hardware that they collect data, the connectivity, and also advanced analytics. So all these three pillars have to work hand in hand together in a very reliable way for us to have the data and make sure that we can transmit the data, and also we can analyze the data. So when it comes to IoT in construction, there are the variety and the types of data are limitless. Every single aspect of a construction site, we can collect data. And that data, as Brian mentioned, are data that we collect from sensors, as well as other data that are related to those projects. So all together, they generate a big data structure or a huge data set from a construction site. And data collection can be done in many different ways. Quote unquote, the traditional and most conventional way of collecting data is using sensors in the sites. But as I mentioned, we can combine that with other enterprise data and other project-related data. So what we see in the construction is that when we deploy sensors in the construction sites, data are collected during construction phase. But I think the construction is moving to a direction that some of these sensors can stay in the structures for the lifetime of the buildings, and they can be used for during the post-construction, and they can be used for smart buildings or other initiatives that could happen post-construction. We are not limiting ourselves just to the construction phase, and this data could be related to material performance, concrete monitoring as an example. As John and Brian mentioned, environmental conditions, air quality, gases, noise, and assets, monitoring of assets and equipment in the buildings, detecting emergency events, leak detection, water leakage detection, all these data together. And I think the goal is to use all these data using a very robust IoT infrastructure for increasing productivity and efficiency. We have seen that how sensors can improve the schedule of the projects, how we can be more predictive and proactive by monitoring tasks that are in critical path in construction jobs, for example, a concrete pouring job. Having a very good visibility into asset utilization. Are we using the asset at their maximum capacity, or can we transport the assets that are not being utilized at their capacity to a different job site and reduce the overall cost of the projects? And safety is one of the biggest aspects of using IoT, keeping the workers safe from environmental hazards, from any other hazard that could happen during the construction phase. And also any construction project has neighboring buildings and structures, and ensuring that the integrity of the other structures are intact. And all these things could be done by having a proper data collection and data analytics platform to ensure that what's being done in the construction site is keeping the project as productive and as efficient as possible, and ensure that the job site is at the safest condition. I think others can add more to what I mentioned, but I think that's the value of the data.
Excellent. Keith, I'll switch it to you, and then we will move on to our next question just to keep us right on time.
Sure thing. So yeah, I mean, analytics and the construction industry, I mean, we're catching up. If you think about, you know, you used to get out a map and you would look where I want to go and try to figure out how to get there on a paper map. And then we had MapQuest where you could put stuff in. And then now we have Google Maps, which actively tells us, hey, there's less traffic this way, go that way. So just like that, the processes that we're doing in buildings is no different. We can innovate with the technology available. I'll just give you some data, nerdy data stuff. I mean, we have a project with PCL we're working on, has over 60,000 data points that we're pulling every 5 minutes. That's 17 million samples a day of data coming in. That data, some of it's useless, some of it's very, very useful. So it's sorting through all that in an automated way and leveraging that data in order to perform your work smarter. That's really what it's about. So in the traditional model of a building construction, we typically get involved at the commissioning stage in our case. So commissioning is looking at every system in a building, but you can't look at every system in a building. So you pick a sample of them and you look at them for a very short period of time and you say, yeah, everything looks good. You know, we think we're good. But meanwhile, you've looked at 5 or 10% of those systems and laid eyes on them and actually seen if they're performing well. So what analytics can provide, or data and IoT, is like the ability to look at 100% of those systems, but not just for a small period of time, but for an ongoing period of time, so that, you know, you're making sure that the building is, you know, is being delivered to the specification and to the high quality standards that that are expected of modern buildings. So I think that's the real difference, is we're not looking through manually and writing things down and looking at things anymore. We're actually managing things using outliers and using analytics to point out the things that need attention. And that's a huge shift.
And that's such a volume of data to process. And to your point, you just need to get the right stuff out of it. Moving along though, how about the risk in the construction site? Are you seeing trends in this space? And John, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'll leave kind of the insurance side to Brian maybe to mention, because you know he's a bit more in tune on that risk insurance. You know, I look at it from an operational perspective, and I see and Brian mentioned this also at the beginning, which is the people resources, right? We are lacking a lot of labor on our sites today, and not just in Canada, it's across North America, across the world. And so one of the ways we're mitigating that risk is simply the fact that we're using technology, because we have to do the same amount of work or more work. Our buildings are getting more complex, and so that at the end of the day, we have to do more work with either less people or the same amount of people. And so technology is playing a big role in mitigating that risk. So I think the people aspect is one. The second one that I'm seeing a lot more, and where technology is helping now more and more, especially on the visual analytics side, is on quality control, right? QC. So quality in a building, and because it's becoming more complex, because these buildings are more smart, we have to really start, we're starting to see more and more or be more in tune with our quality control, right? And using technology to do that, whether that's using a 360 camera to visualize and inspect and so on, or in more detail, or thermal scanning or drones, where you were seeing the technology grow in that space, because the quality has to be up to par, because these buildings are getting so much more complex. So I would say that from a people's perspective and quality, I think these are the two risks that I see on operation, and I'll leave it for the other panelists to talk about. But
So Brian, I'll ask you to answer this, and then we're going to move into our last question and our Q&A. So Brian, your thoughts on the risk?
Yeah, so great points that John made. We've been working closely with insurance companies on deploying JSI within that industry for their construction customers and others. And I think the question is, what are the trends in this area? I mentioned earlier the concept of ecosystem. We can't possibly produce all this technology, and the insurance companies we've been working with have definitely used the word ecosystem as the vehicle in which risk controls are delivered to the job site. But not only that, not only do you want the best risk controls on the job site, but you want a means to monitor how you're doing in managing that risk. So insurance is all about data, and having a tool like JSI that incorporates IoT data and other ecosystem partners under one roof, if you will, on that single pane of glass, I think is something the industry is looking towards, not just in construction, but others, particularly insurance. And I think the other aspect to insurance, in conversations I've had with insurance professionals, is that insurance always based decisions and claim or rates on data of the past. You're a 25-year-old male and you're a risky driver, and the premium is reflected in that. That concept extends to any industry. And I think a phrase I heard termed was edge underwriting. There's edge computing, but now we're seeing a movement towards edge underwriting, because now you have this IoT data at the edge, and now you can move into the world of predictive and prescriptive analytics to start offering insurance at the edge based on IoT data. And I think you're going to see a lot of that going forth, not only in construction underwriting, but in the market in general. And I think the final point I want to make around that is that everything's based on data. Data is the new oil. It was a phrase common years ago, and I think it's the new cement and steel and plywood used in construction, because we have access to it. It's what we do with it, and the systems that we use to analyze and start making predictions about what's going to happen in a job site. So I like that term, edge underwriting. I think is an interesting term that one of my colleagues in the insurance industry used, and I think that we're going to see more and more IoT, not just in construction, but in other industries as well.
Thank you, Brian. Elliot, what you wanted to add into this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one one little element to this, because at Eddy we work very closely with insurers and brokerages across North America who are taking a look at relevant risks that constructors are facing, as well as operating environments. And what we're seeing, historically, I come from the restoration industry, so historically what we've seen as the number one risk on site is going to be typically water, as it relates to percentage of claims, as well as in terms of the actual payouts as it relates to the various risks on site. I think water comprises over 70% of all of the payouts taking place on these real estate sites, and particularly at later stages of construction, when you've got a really almost substantially completed asset, and you can experience potentially catastrophic losses. These kinds of things can throw back construction schedules by significant margins, and can add a huge amount of overrun cost as well. So it's almost like what IoT is doing in this scenario is taking things that people have historically just accepted as part of the issues that you were dealing with in construction, like water damage was just something that people dealt with. It's almost like the mental health issue of the construction industry, from my perspective. And everyone deals with it, and people don't really talk about it because it was just something you deal with. So now we're no longer at that stage where technology is enabling us to get ahead of those issues proactively as opposed to reactively.
Beautiful. So we have quite a few questions. So I want to get into that right now. And I'm going to leave it a bit open unless someone is asked specifically for you, please do jump in. So the first question is, how much control of managing their environment will be shared with tenants and occupants of a building with centralized or connected building systems?
I can grab that one to start. So I think that is a trend that's evolving in the industry, is giving control to occupants and tenants with regards to things like temperatures or ventilation rates and things along those lines. So historically that's set at a building level. You say, this is our set point for temperature in the building, and it's going to be 22 degrees or whatever that temperature is. And more there are apps being developed which allow input from occupants and obviously from building managers to be able to dynamically request or make changes or vote. And there's a few of those emerging technologies on the market which are starting to be used more and more. So I think that's an interesting change to the way things had been done previously.
Interesting. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay, so we'll move on. Will smarter buildings have to make a choice between occupants' comfort versus energy efficiency? If so, what might be the deciding factor? Who would like to take that one?
Wow.
John, you're smiling, so I'm going to put you. Oh, Brian? Okay, go, Brian.
I think it's another Keith question.
No, I was going to say that sounds like a Keith question.
Right. I think, well, it depends on the priority of the particular building owner, whoever's paying the bills. So if you prioritize employee comfort, let's say, for productivity purposes, and that's your paramount thing that you want to encourage, then but it is a balance, and we encounter that balance all the time. And it's, do you want to encourage people to wear a sweater, or do you want to have the heat higher? And there's an energy impact to that. And now more than ever, there's also the there's the cost implication of energy, but there's also the greenhouse gas emission implication, and being good stewards for the environment. So I think those are balanced. You can't answer that question for any particular organization. That has to be answered as far as their particular focus and what they're looking at.
It's a hard middle ground, I think, to probably achieve. But I would echo. I think I'm seeing it more with our clients that the sustainability side has become a real, or kind of the environmental and green side of their business is growing a lot more. And so I think there's that shift a little bit. But yeah, it's a bit of a hard balance. It's really going to depend on the kind of client and the type of client too. So.
Makes sense. So next question, the biggest benefit of analytics for smarter buildings seems to be reducing energy costs. What other areas do you see improving with the use of analytics? Who would like that one?
I can take it.
Awesome.
That's right. I mean, so far, energy reduction has been one of the main drivers for the growth of analytics in prop tech generally. But I think beyond that, analytics can help with predictive maintenance of equipment. And at the end of the day, it's going to reduce the operational costs and maintenance costs in buildings. If you look at high rises, commercial buildings, they all have very sophisticated HVAC equipment and other types of equipment. I think the analytics would help with predicting the failures and properly plan predictive maintenance for the equipment. So at the end of the day, it's going to increase the lifetime of the asset and also reduce the ongoing operational maintenance cost.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
One of the areas in the areas of digital twins, which is frequently used in buildings, one of the use cases that I've seen is where analytics plays a key role is in the optimization of elevators. So knowing and observing traffic patterns in the building, tenants, for example, obviously at 8 o'clock in the morning as they're going up to work or leaving their residence in a high-rise condominium, for example. I think analytics, again, not so much in the predictive asset maintenance, but in the people flow and the people management. I think analytics plays a big role. And you're seeing models being developed in digital twins that actually look at that particular topic. The other area it plays into is building evacuation. What is the most efficient way to evacuate a building? And analytics plays a role in that, in trying out various use cases or scenarios to optimize that model. And then that influences design and construction so that buildings are built so that they can be evacuated efficiently and safely. So that's some of the use cases I've observed in the industry.
One more thing just to jump into, I think the use of occupancy data and sensors is increasing substantially. COVID has accelerated that because we need to know how many people are in the building, where they are in some cases. And so there's various levels of occupancy. Is the building occupied? Is there one person there, or is there somebody there at least? And then that was what we used to use. You know, we'd have a schedule on off, or we'd have a PID sensor that would say someone's in that area, turn the heat on or turn the ventilation on. But that's not as, you know, that's no longer acceptable. Now we need to know potentially how many people are in the building and where are they in the building for various reasons. Evacuation be one, but also proper ventilation for safety purposes, and then optimizing, you know, energy efficiency. I know the question is other than energy, but to optimize energy efficiency, are you oversupplying fresh air? And there's 3 people in the building on floor 2, and you're ventilating the whole building, and that's a huge potential saving. So as those occupancy sensor technologies continue to improve, we're going to see new applications, both for control, but also for analytics and other methods.
Excellent. Okay, so quickly, because we're running out of time here, the current IoT prop tech landscape is quite vast. Are there any plans towards standardization? For example, requiring IoT devices used in buildings using open source software. Who would like that? And this will probably be our last question for the day. Anyone have an answer to that one?
Well, I have a comment on that one.
Okay.
Certainly, you know, various IoT sensors always require a gateway, and not all sensors talk to all gateways. So one of the challenges on a job site is if I have 3 sensors from 3 different vendors, I may require 3 different gateways. And one of the things we're actively looking at is, how do we I heard the word standardize. How do we get a commodity-based gateway that can handle any sensor is really something that we're looking at to simply simplify and reduce the cost. As to the actual protocols and standards across the various technologies, LoRa is very common, long range, 16-kilometer range with a LoRa sensor and gateway combination. And perhaps Hamid can comment further on the technology, because I know his firm is actively engaged in developing these technologies. But from our perspective, it's about simplifying and reducing the complexity of the technologies to drive the cost down.
Okay, so Hamid?
Yes, thanks, Brian, for your comments. That's actually true. I mean, the IoT space from a technology standpoint is very vast, and there are different technologies for wireless communication, as Brian mentioned, and at some point this has to be standardized. LoRa, which is a type of LPWAN, is one of the technologies that is proven to be very reliable for both construction sites and also buildings. Because of its the frequency range and the penetration in even in deep areas, and also going through different doors and openings in the buildings. So that's actually one of the drivers for our standardization, having a single platform or a single standard communication protocol for all the buildings. And at the gateway level, we also need to standardize the data, because the building owners may have different types of building automation systems, and the gateway has to be designed or configured in such a way that it can stream a standard packets of data that can be integrated with other platforms. At the end of the day, the IoT infrastructure for construction and for buildings has to be sensor and sensor type agnostic, because the field of sensors is growing so fast, and new technologies and new types of sensors are being developed. It's important to make an infrastructure and build an infrastructure that is agnostic to the type of sensors that are being deployed in those type of environments.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you. This was very informative. So PCL, Eddie, Copper Tree, AOMS, I'm going to say that right. I want to thank all of you. This was extremely informative. The next session, which starts at 2 p.m., the technology, a deep dive into connected technology and platform, will be coming up with Rogers, mCloud, LoRa Alliance, Semtech, and Eddy Solutions. Again, thank you so much. This has been recorded and will be shared out, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Brenda.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.